ask questions in our relationship, or even the person we're dating, how on earth are we going to be able to have a relationship? So we have to display the type of person that we actually want to be. If we want to be in a loving relationship, we have to be willing to be honest. We have to be willing to ask the difficult questions. That's how you know that you can safely proceed into a relationship, because it's like, oh, I showed this person that I'm willing to ask the difficult thing.
Today, I am super excited to have my very special guest, Natalie Lue. Natalie is the author of multiple dating books, including 100 Days of Baggage Reclaim. I love the title of the next book, How to Say No, The Scripts, Mr. Unavailable and the Fallback Girls, and one of my favorites, Love, Care, Trust, and Respect. She also has a very popular blog and a podcast called The Baggage Reclaim Sessions, which she started by sharing very honestly about the many painful dating experiences she had to go through in her own life, even hitting the bottom of the bottom in terms of her self-esteem. What I love about Natalie is that she then realized that, in quote, in order to change the destructive pattern, it takes willpower, courage, and consistently doing things differently than how you have before. You need to believe in yourself more than you believe in them, unquote. And she actually did the work by taking a hard look at herself, pulling herself through the process, doing things differently, to now having a great relationship of her own. And of course, having this first-hand experience makes her a great dating coach. So welcome, Natalie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I'm very excited. So let's actually talk first about this topic of emotional unavailability, which you talk about a lot. You wrote a whole book about it. Mm-hmm. Why did you choose to focus on this topic, and why is it so important in dating and relationship?
I think my focus with it started because that's where I started out from. Was I thought of myself as miscommitment, Miss Monogamous, I'm just like so emotional, I'm so there. But I realized that I am the common denominator. And I was always with emotionally unavailable men. And it's funny how that's who I want to be around. I don't want to be with somebody who's emotionally open and vulnerable. I'm always in relationships with those types of people. And that caused me to take a look at myself. And I realized, wow, I'm actually not so emotionally available myself. And that was my starting point, because I think a lot of people believe that, oh, it's just the people that I'm with who are emotionally unavailable. I'm fine. I'm like super available. But actually, we have to ask ourselves, why is it that when it comes to dating or being in a relationship, we consistently want to be involved with people who we are in no danger of actually being emotionally available with? Emotional availability is about really our willingness to be intimate and vulnerable in our relationships, to feel our feelings and to be very, very present to our relationship. It's about how emotionally giving we are. When we don't consistently feel our feelings, and we're always looking for ways to sort of, manage things with rules and to be like hiding behind certain things, like it might be sex or, doing things for the person, like people pleasing. These are ways that we get to hide from vulnerability and intimacy. And a lot of us are afraid of feeling, and we're afraid of vulnerability and intimacy. And so it feels easier to chase after somebody who they blow hot and cold, that we have to chase down, because that feels nice and safe. When somebody is just open, we're like, I don't know what to do with you.
That's so interesting, because, and I love what you said about what emotional availability is. It's our willingness to be intimate and our willingness to give our emotion. I think that's kind of how you share, how you define it. That is a very particular description of emotional availability that I've heard so far. And I think that's so on point. And it's interesting because a lot of us think that, like, oh, being in a relationship with people who are hot and cold, that's the hot or cold, that's the more like hard part. But what I'm hearing you say is that actually being with somebody who's emotionally available and fully being open and willing to engage with you, that actually is the more challenging part. Is that what you?
Yeah, a lot of us are afraid that if we were fully ourselves and we allowed ourselves to get close enough to somebody, we think, oh, that's going to hurt a lot. We're not in any danger of being super vulnerable and allowing somebody to get really close to us. if we never know where we stand, if the person is blowing hot and cold, if we never have to be ourselves, if the person is never really communicating with us, if we're not communicating, so we don't have to be so available in those situations. And it's like we're setting ourselves up for pain, because you're right. When we're involved with somebody who's blowing hot and cold, and their actions don't match their words, and they don't want to commit, and it's like they say, oh yes, I want to be with you, and then gradually sort of do things that sort of contradict that feels, yes, upsetting, painful even, but it also feels like familiar. And also, I think we can get very invested in that. A lot of people think, oh, I don't feel interested until I know there's a possibility I'm not going to get this, until I know that this person is like, withheld from me. And then it's like, yes, I really, really want you. When a person is like right up there and being like, okay, I'm just here, we're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense to me. But actually, the real vulnerability comes in, are we willing to allow somebody to truly get to know us and for us to know them? Are we willing to let them get to know us and continue getting to know them? Are we willing to have boundaries? Are we willing to engage in conflict if needed? Because conflict is actually a form of intimacy. Obviously, we don't want to be fighting morning, noon, and night. But if we're not willing to say or do things that run the possibility of conflict, we don't have an intimate relationship.
Right.
So when people say to me, oh, Natalie, we never disagree about anything. We never, ever argue. And we've been together for like 10, 15, 20, however long it is. I'm like, that's not a badge of honor. Like, that is not something that you need to boast about, because somebody's lying. If you're always like, oh, we agree about everything, so one of you is lying. Because how is that possible that you're around it? I can't think of one person. Even my own children, we don't see eye to eye like all the time. How can we be around we think exactly the same thoughts? No, you don't. It's just that there's a part of you that's like, oh no, like if we were to disagree, that would mean that there's something wrong with me or them or our relationship. But conflict is a form of intimacy.
Right, right.
But boundaries are also a form of intimacy.
Right.
Are we willing to say and show no? If we're not, we don't have intimacy, because we can't be real. So these are things that all the things that we are trying to avoid are the things that make us emotionally unavailable.
Right. I'm so glad you said that, because I do definitely have tons of share of conflict with my own partner. So, conflict is not bad. That's really great to hear. I want to bring this to like at the very practical level for our daters out there. So let's say I went on a first date and I really like this person. And I heard Natalie's lesson, and, I want to be emotionally available, but at the same time, I don't really know how the other person, feels about me. And so there's part of me that's worried, like, okay, if I'm like, sharing everything and like, make sure that they know that I'm super available, then, what if they think I'm weird, or I'm like too aggressive, or like I'm too, I don't know, desperate.
Yeah. Well, I always think of relationships as having 5 stages. And so the stage of the relationship really dictates the level of intimacy, and 2, how emotionally available we can be. And one of the unrealistic expectations that we have of us and others as daters is thinking that we can look at a dating profile or go on a date and be like, oh yeah, I had a really good time, and they were so emotionally available. Like, how is that even possible? Like, how would we even know that? And they'll be like, oh, because they said, I don't know, they talked about when their pet died a few years back, or they got emotional when they talked about, I don't know, something that, they really care about. These might hint at certain things, but the truth is that, so stage 1 is when we are out on dates with people. So stage 0 is when we haven't been on a date yet. Maybe we haven't even met in real life yet.
Stage we just connected on
yes,
CMB.
Exactly. Yes, okay. Exactly. So yeah, you're at stage 0. So at stage 0, right? Nobody has any business like chatting to somebody and going, and they just seem so emotionally available. You're making that up in your head, right? Stage 1 is then when you have met and you've now gone on at least one date, right? So now you're in stage one, and that is in the initial getting to know.
Okay.
And the thing that I say to people is, at this stage of things, we can get a sense of, whether we are curious, interested, attracted to somebody, but we can't really know the length and breadth of the person. Like, we can't really know how emotionally available they are because we're not in a relationship with them yet. And until both people mutually agree to move on from dating to being in a relationship, you can't know. It's a bit like, when you go for, and this is an analogy I use all the time, but when we go for a job interview, interviews have very, very stark parallels with dating. And no, it's not that we are interviewing for a job, but it's the whole, like, jobs sound amazing when we're at a job interview. So the company sounds amazing, the job sounds amazing, we sound amazing, so the company sells themselves well, we sell ourselves really well. As Chris Rock always says, one of my favorite quotes, I think it's from Bigger and Blacker, and he says, when we first meet somebody, when we're dating them, we're not meeting them, we're meeting their representative. We're wearing our best
that's so true.
We're giving it the big laughs, telling the best stories, bringing our A game. When we move from dating to being in a relationship, this is where the real getting to know begins. This is where now, because you've both, got some skin in the game as such here, and you both said, okay, we're going to be exclusive, we're now going to be in a relationship. This is where there's vulnerability in agreeing to do that, but there's a vulnerability in exploring that. And what then we get to discover is we get an initial sense of how emotionally available each person really is. So can we, recognize, and express our feelings in a relationship? If we try to talk about something, do they shut down? Do we shut down? It's noticing these things. Can we have a disagreement and move on from it? Right? Do we feel our feelings, or do we, we all kind of like blocked up and closed down? Do we drop hints instead of communicating directly? All of this type of thing. So one of the things I say to people is, if we put, every week I will hear from people who will literally say to me, we've been on 1 date, 2 dates, 3 dates, whatever amount of dates. I'm having a great time. And, I think we have the same values, and they just seem so emotionally available. And I go, no, you just don't know that from going on. What we can really tell is from dating before getting into a relationship with somebody, we can pick up very clear signs that somebody is not for us.
Okay.
Code red alerts or red flags, we can pick up on those in the early stages if we're paying attention while dating.
Right.
So we can't say, hand on heart, this person is emotionally available, or this person shares exactly the same values as me. But we can say clearly when somebody exhibits certain behaviors, or maybe they're inconsistent or they're rude or whatever it is, we can be like, yeah, we don't share similar values.
I see.
Once we go further, then we can start to get a sense of that. But at the dating stage, we can't pick that up.
Right. Okay, I'm so glad you said that, because the stage one dating and moving on to the relationship stage, I was thinking, oh, wait, but if I can't really know if this person is emotionally available, and then I'm committing to being this exclusive relationship with them, that feels kind of scary. But what you're saying is, in the dating stage, what you can know is that they're basically not like completely emotionally unavailable. Like, so you want to make sure that that's out of the way. Like, you don't want to be committing to somebody who's emotionally like definitely unavailable. And then over time after that, you can find out the level of emotional availability that person has, and if there's a fit with you on that level. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely. And I think also, if we bring it back around to the job example, when we interview for a job, right? So they are interviewing us, and we are also interviewing them, hopefully, to find out about the job and the company and whichever else. But here's the real deal. We do not know what the company and the job is like until we start the job.
Yeah.
And it is exactly the same thing with relationships. What people want is for all the information to come up front. We would love a crystal ball that says, yes, go ahead, it's going to last. Or, well, you could go ahead, but you're going to be done and dusted in 3 months or whatever.
Right.
So we would love we want the information up front. We want to look at a dating profile and have it say, don't waste your time, or this one is perfect for a relationship. And that is not how it works. We're not buying cars and electrical goods here, you know. It's not like, you know, when you buy a house and it's got all of this information about the house, about I don't know how eco-friendly it is or whatever. You just don't get that with people. Right. And even then, you move into the house and you find surprises under the wallpaper. You find surprises in the foundation. So the thing is, when we say, we're afraid to make a commitment, all we're doing when we move from stage 1 to 2, we are mutually agreeing to establish a relationship and explore the possibilities. We're not saying, well, we're entering into a contract forever and evermore, and this better go somewhere. We can't really know how suitable this person is and what kind of relationship we could have without actually having a go at a relationship.
Right. So even stage 2, okay, so we're in a relationship, but that just means that we're both agreeing to explore more. We're not saying like we're going to get married or anything like that. We're just exploring, right?
Yeah, exactly. Stage 3 is so stage 2, as I said, you're establishing a relationship, and it's where the real getting to know begins. Because like when you're dating somebody, right? You got no skin in the game. You can be whoever you say you know, whoever you want to be. Once you get into a relationship and the honeymoon stage passes, and some people see that as a really bad thing, but you get to see, how does this person respond under pressure, under stress? Right. How do we both deal with boundaries? What happens when we disagree? What happens when this person doesn't get their own way? What happens when I don't get my own way? We get to see, this person said when we were dating, oh, they really, really want to be in a relationship. Is that true? Right. The person talked about certain things. I'm not saying that we're playing Columbo here and trying to, oh, can I catch them out on that thing that they mentioned from before? But it's like, whatever impressions that we got in that dating stage, is this following through? Is this stacking up now? And we can't progress to stage 3 if we don't have boundaries, if the intimacy isn't deepening in the relationship. So if it doesn't feel like we're getting to know each other more, that we're being more ourselves, that we're being more vulnerable, then we're not really going to progress to stage 3. And when I started talking about relationships in these terms, oh my gosh, and I think I started talking about it, I think I did it first in my book, Love, Care, Trust, and Respect. And then I spoke about it a lot on the podcast and on the blog as well. And I heard from so many people, and they said, oh my gosh, this totally makes sense to me now. Because a lot of people see it as, oh, we've been together for X amount of years, or we have a house, or we have a dog, or whatever it is. So we are at stage 4. Right. But actually, relationships are found, like the health and wealth of them comes down to intimacy. There are people who have been together for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And let me tell you right now, they're at stage 2, stage 3 at an absolute push. Yeah. And what in stage 2, something that happens as well. So you progress from dating into a relationship, but sometimes what we do as humans is we get into this bit of a power struggle where it's like, no, the relationship should be this way. I do things this way. And the other person's going, no, I do things this way. And it's about, do we become a team at this stage and we share those core values, or are we divided by, you know, conflict, criticism, disappointment? Bearing in mind, this might not be happening within the relationship. It's like, how does this person respond in our relationship when they have conflict at work or with family? Are our lives coming together? Because I think there can be a lot of focus on the other party and what they're doing within our relationship. But it's like, there are things that will be happening, like look at lockdown and all of these things. And it's like, you might be feeling stress about family. How does that ripple into your relationship? It's also about, as well, who are we in our relationships? Because a lot of the time we're looking to, oh, let me look for a sign in this person that they're emotionally available, that we share core values. Who are we?
Yeah, what are we
behaving? Yeah, what are we bringing? How are we behaving in this? Are we being more of who we really are? Are we being more vulnerable? Are we doing things that we wouldn't do before? Or are we doing the same things that we did in previous relationships that was also problematic there? And if we start to notice these things, we can actually get a sense of, oh, this is a relationship that's really working for me, or, oh, I'm actually not being as vulnerable as I thought I was in.
Yeah.
The thing is, what a lot of people do in dating is they want to date and they want to try and get into a relationship, but they want to do it without any risk at all.
Because we're scared. Like, we don't want to get hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it's like, we want the ROI, return on investment. And so it becomes like, I've spent my 100 dating coins and I want 150 back. And it's like, no. And so it's like, what we want to do is like, okay, and this is how we get into the emotionally unavailable bit. So where we want the sex, or we want the companionship, somebody to talk to. So we want all of that, but without giving too much. So all the time, we've kind of got our eye on our receipts, and we're going, so I won't be around them, but I don't want to like feel too much.
Yeah.
I remember that thing I did last week. What have they done for me this week? Or what if I get hurt? And it's like, actually, part of getting to the love bit in a relationship is we actually have to be willing to for the possibility of having our heart broken. I'm not saying that we should throw ourselves into oncoming traffic.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if we start dating somebody and it's patently obvious that we don't share similar values, that they don't treat us very well, we're going to get hurt, no matter how amazing the sex is or whatever else.
Yeah.
But to take the risk of having a go at a relationship is to be vulnerable in that respect. But we can be vulnerable in clever and safe ways, because if we start dating somebody and we're like, I'd really like to be in a relationship, and the other person said, I'm not really quite so sure.
Right.
We don't have to still proceed. Yeah. That's how we end up hurting ourselves.
Yeah. This is such a good point. And I want to dig in more to this, the point you said, which is, okay, I want the sex and the companionship, somebody to talk to, which feels good and safe. So I want that, but I don't want to feel too much. And I think a lot of us actually are unaware of the fact that, at least, I mean, for sure, I wasn't when I was in a relationship and I was doing exactly that. I wasn't really aware that I was doing that, like that I wasn't really willing to share much. Could you kind of talk about how, in terms of dating, how that could actually like practically really show up? Like, what does it actually mean to be like, I'm not sharing as much? Is it like actually not saying that I really like you, I want us to talk more? Like, what is it that I'm not doing that tells me, okay, I'm not actually being emotionally fully out there?
I think there's a few things. If there's this kind of sense of auditioning where it's like, it feels you always kind of got your eye on, am I saying and doing all the right things for this person to decide to make me their girlfriend or their boyfriend or their future spouse or whatever it might be? That's always a sign that you're holding back, because a part of you is wary that if you show too much of yourself, that the person might change their mind and decide not to commit to you.
So I want to mention that, like, one of the questions that I get, I'm going to now mix it up with some of the questions that we already got, because I think it's relevant. Like, a lot of questions that we get from our daters are things like, I want to know something, but I don't know how to ask. So they want to, like, I want to ask if they're still using dating apps. I want to ask if they would do a phone call instead of text. Like, I want to know what they're looking for, but I don't really want to ask. So is that kind of what you're referring to? Like, you're not actually saying what you're wanting to know?
So that's actually, I mean, that's part of it, but actually that could be one or all of its own. In that, something I say to people is, whatever it is that you're afraid to ask, I mean, obviously outside of something that is quite clearly extremely but whatever it is you're afraid to ask is typically the thing that you very much need to ask. Or whatever it is that you're afraid to say is often the thing that you really, really need to say. And so the whole, are you still on apps thing is a really, really common one. And I will hear from people and they'll be like, oh, well, I just don't want to turn around and say that. But you clearly want to know, and it's clearly material to your involvement, because you're now at a stage where you are involved enough with this person that if they were to be still continuing to talk to other people and potentially dating other people, that would potentially be quite wounding. it's also about knowing where you stand. Because the thing is, if you're not going to ask somebody if they're still on the apps, you're probably not going to ask them really anything else very material about the relationship. So yes, there is, look, it is scary to turn around and be like, are you still on the app? But let's think about it. What's so terrible about finding out that information? We get to make emotionally responsible decisions when we're willing to ask questions or to volunteer information. So the apps thing, it comes up in a similar vein to some people say, well, do I need to tell them that I'm actually dating other people or sleeping with other people? Yes. Especially in these times where now we've got, bubbles and social distance and all these things, but it's about making emotionally responsible decisions. We'll argue to ourselves, well, I haven't said that, we're in a relationship, so surely they should know that I might be sleeping with other people. Maybe, but actually, we need to volunteer that information, especially if we're also sleeping with a person that we're still going, I don't know whether to say anything about that. It's about allowing each person to make emotionally responsible decisions. The thing about not asking questions that we need to ask is that much as we might argue to ourselves that I don't want to look needy, dramatic, whatever, we end up disliking us. We're setting off on the wrong footing in this involvement. Because once we've now taught ourselves out of asking something that we need to know, and then we're privately anxious or irritated or upset or resentful or whatever it is behind the scenes, we're now entering into this relationship with this big question mark, or continuing on with this involvement with this big question mark. And it sours things because we are far more likely to forge an intimate relationship with somebody who we were willing to ask the questions that we were afraid to ask. We're doing ourselves a disservice by not allowing us to ask those questions. Asking questions isn't wrong.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. And so our willingness to ask the questions that, sometimes we feel afraid to ask, but we definitely, like you said, those are the questions you absolutely actually have to ask. Or willingness to share our feelings. Is that what kind of you're referring to when you say like you being emotionally available, because you're kind of taking that risk?
Yes. And I mean, that is very, very much part of it, because people who are emotionally available consistently feel their feelings, even when they're not the pretty ones. People who are emotionally available have a sense of what their needs, expectations, desires, feelings, and opinions are. They don't necessarily treat it like everything is a fact, but it's like they have an awareness of that, and they're willing to reflect that in the things that they say and the things that they do. They're willing to be who they are. When we start hiding aspects of ourselves because we think, oh, that's gonna mess up my audition to being girlfriend of the year, for example. And
I love that.
we're putting ourselves on the back foot. We are immediately closing ourselves off emotionally. People pleasing is another example of where it's a prime example of where we do things from a place of being emotionally unavailable, because we put on this mask. Outwardly, we're like, oh yeah, everything's fine. Inside, we are crying. We're like, oh my gosh. But it's like, oh yeah, everything's fine. Okay, yeah, sleep with me whenever you want. Yeah, don't bother to call me back. Oh yeah, I'm fine. Inside, oh my God, I'm just like, what?
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, it's and I have done it like way back in the day. I did all of that. And it's the whole editing and shaving ourselves down, pretending to be something we're not, pretending to be okay with things that we are not okay with. It's the grinning and bearing it. It's the whole like sitting there in this turmoil of anxiety and then be like, yeah, I'm fine, yeah, I'm fine. Oh yes, I love you too. But secretly we hate ourselves inside.
Yeah.
And we can't forge loving relationships from that place. When we're emotionally giving, it's like we understand the difference between us and others. I think when we're in the early stages of dating and we're already saying things like, oh, like we're just the same. Oh, like I just know that they feel exactly the same way as me. We're already being codependent in our thinking. And that's a part of us that's avoiding being us. And I just think it's that willingness to feel the discomfort and do the uncomfortable thing anyway, because that's how you move on to better relationships. Like,
Right.
so something I said on Instagram last week was how I hear from so many people who are like, I am so ready to be in a relationship and I'm so sick and tired of being with emotionally unavailable people. I am done with it. And then what do? They get on the apps again, they start dating people and they're going, is it different this time? And I say to them, are you different? Because if you keep doing the things that you typically avoid doing in relationships that you don't want to be in again, you're going to be in that relationship again, even if it's just from how you are behaving. So what I would say is if CMB daters are thinking to themselves, oh, I always am afraid to ask questions, that is the thing that you need to make it your priority to do, to make sure that you get out of this pattern of ambiguity, of feeling like you're waiting around for this person to give you the information without you having to put yourself out and ask anything. So whatever it is that you typically do that you know isn't working for you, you have to ensure that you don't do it this time around to basically be more emotionally available.
I love that. So try something different so that you can make sure that you're showing up differently.
Yeah.
Because when you're emotionally available and you're taking risk, I'm sure that's contagious too. And you almost give the other person the permission to do the same, and it becomes like this mutual thing. Do you have any tips? Like intellectually, I understand that it's important and I have to do it. If I want to cultivate that loving, fulfilling relationship, but we also know that it's scary. It's scary, and sometimes you just need a little bit of help to do that. Okay, I'm gonna now ask questions that I've been avoiding asking this time. Like, any practical tips that you can share with our daters?
So I think in terms of asking questions, like anything where we know that we want to, for instance, say no, or we know that we need to ask something, or we know that we need to do something, and then we delay and we delay and we delay on it, the longer we leave it, the more intense it's going to be when we go to do it. Because sometimes what happens is we do it when our back's against the wall. We basically wait until we're pissed off.
Right.
And what happens then is that how we wanted to ask it comes out in a way that doesn't best reflect our intentions or who we are as a person. And it's a bit like, like when somebody asks you to go to something that you don't actually want to go to, and you keep meaning to say no, but you're afraid of their reaction. And so you leave it and you leave it and you leave it. What's going to happen? You're either going to tell them that you're not going to go at the very last minute and you're going to piss them off in the process, or you're going to force yourself to go to it because you've now left it till too late. So a similar thing happens with the whole like asking questions thing, is that the longer that it goes on for, where this finger's rumbling, it's going to come out in this sort of tense way, or this torrent squeaking, and you'll be like, oh my God, like what on earth am I doing to myself? It's also a good idea as well to be honest with yourself and ask. So being intentional makes a big difference. Understanding why you want to know helps you to understand if you need to know. Because so going back to the whole, are they still on dating apps? Okay, why do we want to know? We can be honest with ourselves about it. We might want to know because actually we're quite interested in this person and we want to come off these apps and focus on just dating this person for now. That could be it, but it could be, actually, I'm not really sure how I feel about this person, but I just want to know if I'm in competition with somebody else. Now, that's not really a good reason to ask somebody to come off the apps, because then what's going to happen is you're going to move from that onto something else because everything is about a competition. So it's just being honest about your intentions. I think as well that consistency is key. So I don't mean that you need to be asking questions day in, day out, but there are ways to be honest about who you are and what you want on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis or whatever you want to call it, that make it easier that each time you need to be honest and you can. If you only ask questions when your back's against the wall, then of course you're going to feel really intense.
Right.
But if when you're going on dates, you're actually there with the person and you're being yourself and you're having a conversation, it's a natural extension to ask questions.
Right.
But if you're going on dates, and I do this impression quite a lot, so this is something that happens a lot on dates. So you're on a date and the person's like chatting and they turn around and say something and you go, note to self, make sure that I don't wear in future because they don't like people. Okay, note to self, they don't like people who, so all the time, instead of being there and being yourself and interacting with the person, you're just sitting there listening for clues and cues about what you think is going to be the big thing that you can audition with to get the role. And it's like, no, like you're supposed to be there listening, engaging, talking with this person, not auditioning for the hot seat in their relationship. If you're finding that you are afraid to ask questions or to talk about yourself, what's that all about? Like, is it because like something that comes up a lot with people is they are the listener on dates because they're always the listener in other areas of their life. So they sit on the dates and are like this. And inside they're going, well, when are they going to ask me about me? But if you're always the listener, you don't realize how you kind of shape conversations to always be about the other person talking. So it's like, actually, why don't you just start by talking about yourself?
Right.
And these are things that are all examples of little nuggets of vulnerability that make it easier that when you do ask the question, it doesn't feel so out of the blue.
Right.
I think as well, we have to remember, I know that, you know, some of us, not everybody does, of course, but when we're dating, some of us want a relationship and there's certain things that we have in mind. But we have to remember when we're in the early stages, it's not do or die, right? It's not this catastrophic event of, oh my gosh, if I turn around, I have missed my last chance now because I turn around and ask this question. Think about it in these terms. If we can't ask questions in our relationship or even of the person we're dating, how on earth are we going to be able to have a relationship? So we have to display the type of person that we actually want to be. If we want to be in a loving relationship, we have to be willing to be honest. We have to be willing to ask the difficult questions. That's how you know that you can safely proceed into a relationship, because it's like, oh, I showed this person that I'm willing to ask the difficult thing. And if they turn around and say, no, I don't want to take myself off the app, is it the end of the world if that is the case? Because now you know. It's better than not asking, than still being on the app. You're sitting at home, biting your nails off, going, oh my God, this is on the app, I don't know. But now you know, and you can do something about it and move forward. And you will feel like you backed yourself. The worst thing is when you don't ask questions or you don't have boundaries or whatever it is. And what do you do afterwards? You're like, oh my God, I'm so pathetic. I'm such a loser. I can't believe that you did. Like, you hate yourself for it. If you ask questions, you will not hate yourself for it.
Right. I love that. And so many nuggets of wisdom here. So like the first thing, don't wait too long because it's going to make it harder even to actually ask something or say something that you want to say. And the second thing that I love about what you said is like, instead of doing a note to self when you're on a date, if you're finding yourself doing that, actually engage, like maybe be curious. Oh, why, what makes you say that you, I don't know, don't like this look or something like that, instead of writing, okay, note to self, don't wear this because this person doesn't like it. Then you can actually use it as an opportunity to get to know each other even more. So I really love that. And and the third thing that I'm taking away for myself is oftentimes I see daters really like beating themselves up. Okay, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have like whatever, because that's what made them turn away. But that rarely is the case, right? Like it's not because you asked that question at that point that this relationship with this person didn't work. It's so early at that stage that it really isn't that. It's something else.
Not at all. I mean, listen, if asking somebody a question is going to make somebody scared and make them run off, honestly, they did not have the mettle for a relationship in the first place. It's like, be thankful that they're gone. And sitting there beating yourself up is like going, well, I bought my lottery ticket and even though the numbers hadn't been called out, I mentally started spending that money already. And now that my numbers didn't come up, I'm just so mad at myself. For your numbers not coming up in the lottery? Right. But it's this, like in dating, I just find that people are like, oh, this one false move. Well, maybe it's because I said that thing on the date, or maybe I just wasn't bouncy enough, or maybe if I'd responded in 2 minutes of the text instead of 5 minutes of the text, then maybe we would have gone on another date. If things are going to collapse on asking a question, this person is not the person for you.
Right.
Because if you can't ask any questions or you can't do whatever it is, then what kind of relationship could you possibly have?
Exactly. And I really want to emphasize this point because I do see a lot of our daters just, beating ourselves. And I definitely was there. Oh, God, I shouldn't have said that. That's what kind of ruined the whole thing. And I think it's easy to kind of get in this space, especially if we really, really like that person. Mm-hmm. And I want to just really clarify that rarely is the case that because you said one thing in the wrong timing, that this person decided that it's not going to work. It's rarely that case. And also, even like Natalie's saying, even if that is true, I mean, then ask yourself like, okay, well, if this person is going to turn because I asked that one question, is this really the right person for me? So I really love that. So, wow, the time just flies. I had so many things I wanted to ask you, and it's like now it's almost the end. I do want to ask, well, actually, before I move on, let's actually wrap that stage because that's really interesting. We only talked about until like really stage 1 and 2. So what are the 3, 4, 5?
So we did stage 0. So we did stage 0. Right. Yeah. So there's stage 0, 1, and 2. Stage 3 is when we've moved past like that honeymoon stage. We've gone past any power struggle, and we know that we can have boundaries, that we are being ourselves. And so now we're evolving the relationship. And so we might be elevating the level of commitment in the relationship. Because I just want to stress, like when we say, like when we've been dating somebody and we decide to, mutually start a relationship, that's not a commitment. Like it's a commitment to start in a relationship, but it's not a commitment to forever and ever. Mm-hmm. So what happens then is when we move to stage 3, it's because the relationship is evolving. Like we know that the relationship is developing, that the intimacy is deepening, and we are both actively sort of, driving that relationship. And, we're allowed to have a future. We're allowed to move forward. We're maybe making commitments to further things down the road. And so, but there's a greater level of intimacy because we have actually allowed each other to get to know each other. And as a result, there's a much deeper relationship. So we're into stage 3.
And stage 3, like, how does it look like? Is there some typical signs that I can kind of see to, oh yeah, now we're in stage 3? Is it like I met the family or something like that?
I tend to discourage people from, yes, meeting family, that type of thing can be signs of it, but you'd be amazed at how many people have met family at stage 1 and stage 2, and the relationship hasn't gone any further than that. So relationships, I say, are about commitment, consistency, intimacy, balance, and progression. And so once you feel as if you both are very relaxed into being yourselves, and you've had your first, maybe second and third, or whatever experiences of conflict and criticism, and come out the other side of it, and you still want to be in a relationship, and you feel like there's a deeper sense of knowing, you're evolving into moving into stage 3.
So it's more about how I feel, and then also like how they feel, which I have to find out through conversations.
Yeah, and it's like there's a definite intimacy to the relationship because you can fight and come out the other side. If you've never had a fight, I'm not saying you're definitely at a stage 2, but you're definitely not at stage 4. Even if you've been together for 50 years, if you've never had a fight, something's off there. If you never disagree, you always say you think the same thing. But also it's like, you both are mutually, like the relationship is mutual, and you're mutually talking about a shared future together. You have shared core values. The future is not a secret between the two of you. I'm not saying you're necessarily planning your wedding, but it's like, yeah, we are definitely in this relationship. We're way past dating, we're way past the beginning, and we're continuing on. And then stage 4 is when you're in it for the long. So there's no stage 5. This is 0 to 4. Going from stage 3 into 4 can be quite seamless in the sense of like, once it's like, we are in this, we are, we're staying together, we're honest with each other. And when we realize that we're not, we find our way back to that. You're in stage 4. It's all about intimacy. It's not about titles, because there are people who are married and some of them are still dating other people. So it's not about titles or but you're making long-term commitments together. You're in it for the long haul together. You are still, I would say, like I'm with my husband now, my now husband, 14 and a half years. And we're still learning things about each other. So we're in the long haul stage of our relationship, stage 4, but you're not complacent. So there's the intimacy is still being, we're still building intimacy. But you've accepted this is the relationship we're in. Now, of course, we can't say we're going to be together in 2199, but nobody needs to predict that. But it's like we're very committed to each other and to the long haul of being together. There are some people who've been together for like 10 years or however long, and one of them still has the foot out the door, that if they disagree today, they're like, yeah, maybe we should end this relationship. You're not at stage 4.
Right. Okay, great. And I, again, love what you said about, I want to emphasize for all the daters out there, because I do get questions a lot like, okay, when do now I've dated for, a month. So now am I in a relationship? I met their family. So now am I like, so there's like all these marks that we try to use to understand where we are. But like what Natalie is saying, it really is about the level of intimacy, and doesn't matter if you've been together with someone for 3 months, 1 year, 10 years. If you're not, the level of intimacy has not evolved enough, then you're not in the latter stages. You could actually, have spent fairly short amount of time with somebody, but if you have that deeper level of intimacy, then you are at a stage 2 or 3.
Yeah. And because the thing is that, yes, in an ideal world, meeting somebody's parents would mean that you are in a relationship and that this person wants to commit to you and sees you as something serious. But I have an ex who introduced me to his parents on our second date. And after the third date, our involvement was over. Now, and so many people have been caught out by this. And they're like, well, I've met their friends, I've met their coworkers, I've met their kids. Yes, in some instances, those things are a sign that person sees us as, whatever and whatever. But in plenty of other instances, and this is what we were talking about just before we came on, it's this whole rules thing. It's like, oh, well, if we've been together for X amount of weeks, we've been on X amount of dates, or I've met the parents, or we went to IKEA. But a rule that works in some situations is the same rule that does not work in other situations. So we can't use IKEA or meeting parents or meeting friends or whatever it might be as the sole marker of that. It's like, what's the context? It's like, you met their parents after a month. Well, okay, but how about you see where you are in a few months' time? Did they literally say we are in a relationship together? Because if they did, I don't care if you met their parents. You're not in a relationship. If it's not out in the open, if it's a secret between the two of you about whether you're in a relationship, you're not in a relationship.
Right. Yeah. One thing I love to say is that in dating, the only rule in dating is that there are no rules. Because of exactly what you shared. Okay. So moving on, we're almost out of time, but I do really want to ask this question because I know this is something that a lot of our daters, a lot of us, have in mind. Dating in the light of recent, events surrounding racial justice and inclusivity. So now more than ever, we've all realized the importance and the dire need for diversity and inclusion, and how much we lack them right now as a society, and how much we need them, and how important it is. And do you have any thoughts on how this applies to our dating life, if at all?
Well, the thing about dating is that a lot of people are driven by bias. Now, all humans have bias. And any human that says they don't have bias, that's just another bias in and of itself. But something that the conversation around racial injustice and bias brings up for us, and diversity, it does offer us an opportunity, not purely just about race, but actually to look at what our blind spots are around dating. Because time and time again, what I see, and if anybody who's listened to this is like, oh, I've been stuck in this pattern and I really, really want to be in a relationship. Your bias has a lot to do with that, because what happens is we keep gravitating to the same types of people again and again. And we'll be like, oh, my type is my type. It's just my taste. I like people who look like this, or who went to this university, or who earned this amount of money. Bias. I'm not judging anybody for that, because we all do it about everything. But the thing is that in dating, there is a lot of using biases to make decisions that just do not make any sense whatsoever. And so we think, oh, I just need to find somebody who, for instance, is at an Ivy League, university, who earns this amount of money, who works in this field. And if I can find somebody like that, then they're perfect for me. How? None of those things tell you anything whatsoever about what type of partner they could be, whether you're compatible in terms of core values. They don't tell you anything about that. So I think that look back at who you've dated. Is there a pattern to it? Do they all look the same? Do they, is the criteria pretty much all the same? This is an example of a blind spot. And it's not about judging yourself or anybody else for doing that. It's more about bringing awareness to what you're doing. Because if you just keep looking in the same places or looking at the same type of people, it is you that's narrowing your dating experience, not everybody else. And again, it's not, you don't need to put shame around it. Everybody has their taste about certain things. We'll walk into a clothes shop. There are certain clothes that we're going to gravitate to over others, right? Yeah. We do the same thing with dating. But what we need to realize is that our taste doesn't actually tell us anything about our needs or the compatibility of a partner. And we may be overlooking, and I'm not purely talking about race here, but I just think that when it comes to the reasons why we're interested in people or the criteria that we may have, that we are often overlooking people who we are far more compatible with because we're looking for something that actually might be totally irrelevant.
Yeah, I think that is such an important point because I also do hear a lot, well, I have this type and I can't feel attracted to, and so, but the thing is, like you said, if we start filtering out people based on all those criteria, then whatever we're left with, we really then at that point can't really gauge and evaluate and be picky about things that really does matter in a relationship, like the emotional availability that we just talked about. Because now you have this little pool that you have to work with versus if we actually are aware of our biases and, not really put a lot of weight to things that we know that really don't matter in a long-term relationship, then you have a much better chance of being able to find that emotional available person, somebody who actually makes you, prioritizes you and is compatible, et cetera, et cetera.
But type is just our way of trying to use a shorthand to skip over vulnerability. It's like a short, basically something I say to people is, look, there's nothing wrong with having a type per se, but if you have a type and you are yet to have a loving, successful, happy relationship with it, if that type turns you into somebody you're not, that is a toxic type. Because type is like, it's like this archetype of this type of, my type was tall, dark, handsome, good looking, but not too good looking, just in case you had too much competition. Needed to have a good job, gave me butterflies. That's pretty much it. Honestly, that type is so nondescript, but so many people have that same type. And so if the person was below a certain height, I was filtering that out. That person could have been anybody. And I got my type every single time. And then I realized my attitude about who I'm interested in reflects how I perceive myself. Because I had a pretty shallow attitude about me too. It was like, well, it's just about how I look and whether I'm intelligent and funny and have a good job. Actually, this is so much more to me than those things. And so with type, we really, have to look at, well, who am I interested in and for what reasons? And people will always say to me, well, I just can't help who I'm interested in. Well, yes and no. Because if you realize that you have a type and you realize that you regularly go out with sociopaths and narcissists, you can be damn sure you would start looking at the factors of what it was. So you can help who you're drawn to, because you would then start looking at, okay, where's my blind spot here? What is it that I typically get drawn? Where am I making assumptions and generalizations? Because types are generalizations. Saying, oh, they've got to be tall, dark, handsome, but not too handsome, funny, has a good job. Saying that that's who can love me and that that's who's going to meet my need, it's a generalization. The person that we're going to have a loving relationship with is more than a generalization. Right. It's more than a type. And so when we think about diversity and inclusion and, type and that type of thing, it's just checking in with us. like, I know people get very, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, we kind of get a little bit antsy when we start to look a bit closer at these things, because none of us like to think, oh, I'm that person who never ever looks like, but it's like, well, why do we say, oh, I could never go out with a person from there or a person who looks like that? What is that all about? Because that can help us to understand ourselves better and to make better, to make more enlightened or evolved choices. And I'm not saying go and force yourself to go out with people that you're not attracted to, but do start evaluating, because what are you trying to say? That people only of a certain race or a certain look are better than when already experience has already taught you that that's not true.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Well, thank you, Natalie. And I'm going to end our interview session with one last question that I will always ask on this show, which is, what is the one advice? Well, actually, it's two. Sorry. So one is, what is the best dating advice that you've ever received? And the second is, what is the one advice that you think could help CMB daters looking for long-term relationship, that, you know, amazing, loving, fulfilling relationship in today's dating world?
Funny enough, what is the best dating advice I ever received? Well, part of why I started Baggage Reclaim is because I generally did not get great dating advice. But my mom said to me, and I think it was a couple of years before I started Baggage Reclaim, she said, you behave like somebody who is like poor, has got like 3 kids, like hanging off her, like left alone, no options. She's like, and I was really, really wounded when she said that to me. And it burned. I thought, what the hell is she talking about? Why would she turn around and say something to me like that? But it kept coming back to me. And I realized that the way that I conducted myself in relationships, I behaved like I didn't have any worth. I didn't have any options. That basically anybody who came along was like, and so my mom was actually absolutely right when she turned around and said that. And because it niggled at me, it was one of those things that I started to really pay attention to the people who I was getting involved with and the way I was thinking about myself. And it changed. It definitely played a big part in changing my attitude towards dating and relationships. The one piece of advice I give to people who are looking for a long-term relationship, it pulls in a few things, which is this. If you're serious about being in a serious relationship, accept no substitutes. What I see people do all too often is like, I really, really want a relationship. I'm ready for love. I'm ready for a serious relationship. And then what happens is they start dating and they get distracted because it's like, well, I do want a relationship, but they're here right now. Or I do want a relationship, but they don't. And well, what if they change their mind further down the road? We're sending mixed messages to us because, you know, life, you know, I always call it like Professor Life keeps throwing us pop quizzes. So we say we want a relationship. It might throw us an unsuitable partner. Okay, well, let's see how serious you are about how much you want a relationship. Now, if we turn around and like, do you know what? Screw it. I'll stick with them for a while. We're basically saying, I didn't actually mean it when I said I wanted to be in a serious relationship.
I love that.
However, we turn around and are like, and the person turns around and says, you know what, I'm really enjoying spending time with you, but, you know, I'm not looking for a relationship. And we turn around and go, do you know what, I really enjoy spending time with you too, but I am super serious about wanting to be in a relationship. So I'm out. We are sending a message to us, to life, that we are absolutely serious about who we are and what we say that we need and want. And so when we're looking for long-term love, if we're serious about being in a serious relationship, we can't choose something that doesn't reflect that. We have to be willing to say no so that we get to say yes to the right types of relationship. And when we do that, we have our eye on taking care of our needs and being who we really are. And so we have to pay attention to, the core. If people show us that they can't treat us with love, care, trust, and respect, they're not serious about loving us. We're not serious. We can't be serious about what we want if we're willing to take them. So we have to lead from who we are. We have to lead with our choices. We have to be willing to say no to anything that doesn't look or feel like the relationship that we say that we're going to be in. And that means that we're going to have to say no. And we should do it with grace, Sure, behind the scenes, we might be like, oh my God, I can't believe we got to turn around. But we have to, because if we start being like, oh, why didn't that person who I went on like 2 dates with turn out to be the one? Why were they? We're kind of carrying like they should have been the one. And we're sending, again, this mixed messages to us. So it's like, you know what? Each person who isn't the one is moving out of the way to make space for the one who is the one.
I love that. So even if we're like, oh, you know, I really, really like this person because I don't know, like this person serves and travels and all that stuff. But if they're not looking for a long-term relationship and that's what you're looking for, you have to be able to say no. Just be clear to yourself and clear to the world what you're looking for. I love that.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, right, so many times I will say to people, tell me what it is that attracted you to this person. And they're like, oh, like I use the example, they surfed and they were good looking and they were so funny and they were intelligent and we got on really well and I fell for them. And, you know, I just thought, you know, it would all kind of work out from there. And I go, well, all of those reasons are lovely. There's just one not so small problem with all of those. And they'll be like, what? None of those have anything whatsoever to do with core values. So it has nothing to do with character and it has nothing to do with having a shared direction about the things that matter. And so ultimately, if you find yourself with somebody and they're great in bed or they surf or whatever it is, if they do not want to treat you with love, care, trust, and respect, if they don't want a relationship, you know, if they're not emotionally available, you got to cut them loose.
Love that. Thank you so much, Natalie, for spending an hour of your time sharing your wisdom. I really, really enjoyed our conversation and thank you so much. Oh, actually, before we leave, so how can they find you if they want to, you know, we had a great conversation, they learned a lot and they want to find you. How can they find you?
I am on baggagereclaim.com where you can find my blog. I've got my podcast, The Baggage Reclaim Sessions, which is on all podcast players, but you can also find that over on the website too, along with, details about everything else I'm doing. I'm also on Instagram. You forgot about that. Instagram, Nat Lue, Natlue.
Guys, go and follow her. Find your materials. It is going to change your dating life. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.